Back by popular demand, at least we like to think it's that way. Welcome back to the UFC preview show here on INC Live. My name is Karl Bainbridge, once again holding the fort for this evening. And much in the spirit of morning combat, which unfortunately had to say goodbye to Brian Campbell, who is going to pastures new, we do have ourselves a replacement for Joe Neal, at least on a temporary basis. But he is somebody who is familiar to the channel if you've been watching our retro reviews. He is my partner in crime for today. It's Mitchell McIntyre. Mitchell, thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here.
Yep. And I have to say this all came very short notice. I contacted Joe to remind him about recording this preview show, and he admitted I didn't realise that the fight cards were happening next week, so I actually booked myself something else. So he's got bigger priorities today instead of talking to me for like 2.5 hours.
Look at him having a life and stuff.
Yeah, I wish I had that. I really do.
I know, right? I'm not bitter.
But this is a card that I was really desperate to talk about for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it is the first card of a new era when it comes to the UFC, the first card of the Paramount era, which we'll be getting into in a little bit more detail. But it's also a little bit of an anniversary as well when it comes to INC Live, because UFC 324 will mark 100 events since we did our first ever preview show, UFC 224. I will try and upload that onto the channel at some point, just so people can get a little bit of a gauge, have a laugh at how utterly incompetent I was as a presenter.
Look, we all get better as we go, so...
At least we like to think too. I think I'm still on a even level playing field. So, Mitchell, this is the first time that some people who only watch the preview shows will be familiar with yourself. So, for anybody who doesn't have a bit of an understanding, what do you bring to the INC team, and what do you think you can offer to the show today?
I was a warm body when they asked somebody to take over. No. So when it comes to like the retro reviews and everything, a lot of these shows I never caught. You know, when I came into kind of MMA and UFC, it was just a little bit before the tough boom. And then I watched it basically the entire time it was kind of on Spike. But when it moved to Fox, I live in Canada. I live in Southern Ontario. And we didn't get like FX, we didn't get FS1, we didn't get Fuel, whatever that was. So a lot of these, like the rise of Conor, the rise of Ronda, you know, up until very recently, I was aware of it, but I wasn't like actively participating in it. So I think when we kind of get to these cards and up to like including now, I believe this card is going to be the first UFC card I watch live since like Randy Couture was up and kicking. So if you haven't been super hardcore the whole time, you can kind of watch with me as we go through these things for the first time. Or if you've seen them, if you know them by like the back of your hand, watching somebody who is seeing them for the first time, you kind of see it with fresh eyes again. That way, you know, you get another kind of perspective of it. Or you can yell at me for being a casual. Either one, at least you have a good time.
And is it a strange experience going from watching events from, say, 2002, 2005, and then going to 2026 and looking at what the sport is now?
Absolutely. The thing, going back and watching, especially when we did the pre tough card with
Tito and Ken.
When Tank Abbott shows up and does like a promo and then leaves, and then we don't call Tiki Gosen, he was just Tiki. Seeing how, oh god, how so utterly early 2000s the cards were, and then now you watch them now and they're very respectfully done. Like they're it's very much this is a sport, this is an athletic competition. We're not trying to gussy anything up. To see how far it's come from where it was at, this kind of like extreme sports style, kind of in your face thing, to where we're at now. It's wild.
I wonder if we'll be seeing as dramatic a change when we go from ESPN to Paramount, because as we've touched on earlier on in the show, this is going to be the first numbered event that takes place under the Paramount era. A big money deal happened
Mhm.
between two parties to have that in place. I think around October time it was confirmed. Um, I am intrigued to see how this goes down, because what I'm seeing first and foremost is a lot of positives. Obviously, pay-per-view
Yes.
is now a thing of the past. Numbered events will be part of the premium service.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that the UFC won't do pay-per-views later on. There's a lot of speculation that if the White House card does happen, that will be part of an extra premium on top of that. Um, the cards are going to be moved a little bit earlier, which for people living overseas like myself is a
Mhm.
big benefit. But in terms of production, I think there's a lot of people expecting maybe a bit too much, in my opinion, because I saw the transition between Fox and ESPN. And
Mhm.
outside of pacing, which was something I think ESPN did a much better job on, there wasn't too much in terms of how the shows looked. You still had the same UFC faces doing the punditry, same
Yeah.
presenters. And outside of Kate Scott, who's kind of taken the Karen Bryant role, I'm not seeing too much changes. I think we're going to get a very similar looking product to what we had
I
a few months before.
Yeah, I think especially kind of up front, because this isn't a pay-per-view, you can, for lack of a better word, if you're on Paramount Plus, kind of stumble upon it. You want it to be as consistent as possible, I think, especially up front. So I don't know if we're gonna get we might get a couple new graphics, maybe a new musical sting coming kind of in and out. Um, but I don't know if it's going to be a complete like transformation, you know?
And do you think Paramount are doing this deal at the right time? Because each to their own, obviously, I have my own opinions, and
Mhm.
you can put as much weight into what I think because I have some really out there takes. But if I had to compare the UFC in 2019, when the ESPN deal first started, and what the UFC is now, I don't think the product is in as strong a place now as it was back then.
I I don't think so either. But I think the name value is probably stronger for having been on ESPN. So I think you're going to get a lot of people. I mean, hopefully, I imagine this is what they're shooting for, who are like, oh, it's the UFC. I know about that. I've heard about that. I've seen it on whatever. Maybe I'll give it a shot. They don't have to know who, Paddy Pimblett is. They don't have to know who Justin Gaethje is. They just know the UFC,
Yeah.
which is, I think, was their plan. And I don't know if it's necessarily a good plan. Um, but we're gonna see with this whole kind of Paramount era, if the name brand can take it as far as they want it to.
Most people heard that name off Fox News, I'm guessing.
Oh boy.
As the UFC normally do when it comes to any kind of new era, they usually load the card, and we are seeing this once again. You
Mhm.
can see those on your screen right now, a breakdown of the main card as well, the prelims, because there is a lot of star power, I think, throughout this card. Every fighter on the main card itself is ranked, a couple of those on the prelims, and as you usually get for the big marquee shows, you also get a couple of UFC kind of project fighters who they want to build up. So, outside of the main event, Mitch, are there any fights in particular you're most intrigued in?
Yeah, so as I was looking through this card, I was surprised to see Devinson Figueiredo on the undercard on the prelims. Uh and that was such an odd, like, it kind of goes to how strong this card is when somebody like him can be put down to the prelims. Uh so as outside of the main event, I'm always interested in seeing Derrick Lewis. I'm kind of a and I guess it's not super popular right now to love the heavyweight division, but guys like that I'm always interested in seeing. Um
I know there's a lot of people who are singling out that Waldo versus Derrick fight as that kind of heavyweight barn burner.
Yes.
But I remember what happened against Francis Ngannou, and everybody said
Yeah.
there's no way this fight's going to be boring. Sometimes when you
No.
do get these two big power punches, you do
Mhm.
get a kind of cagey fight. You do get people a bit too scared to make the first move. And as enjoyable as Waldo's been for his activity, let's not forget he did have a couple of stinkers earlier on in his run. This kind of
Yeah.
reappraisal of Waldo is a fairly recent thing.
I think this is going to be the one. And we have a couple of fights on this card that are going to be kind of kind of milestones for where the career goes from here. Like if we go to Rose Namajunas and Silva, their card or their fight, excuse me. Uh, it's an interesting matchup, but we know the last 4 or 5 fights that Silva has had have ended in a decision, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And Rose Namajunas, we know doesn't exactly want to push the pace if she doesn't have to. So while I'm interested in seeing where Rose Namajunas is, at this point in her career, this one, I think we're in for a long 15 minutes.
I'm surprised that the UFC are doing this with Natalia Silva anyway, because I think after Shevchenko beat Weili, I think most
Mm,
people were singling out Silva as next in line. Because obviously
yeah,
number one's Manon Fiorot, but obviously Shev beat her last year. So
yeah.
you look at Silva next, she's got the long winning streak. Is this maybe the UFC not really being sold on Silva? Maybe she is a bit too much of a decision merchant? Or
I
it could be them maybe hoping that she slips up so either Rose can take that place or Erin Blanchfield, both American fighters, both have a little bit
mhm.
more of a fan base than Natalia Silva.
I think this is one of those. It's kind of a win-win for the UFC. Because if she does lose, she loses to Rose, who's a name talent, and we can push her back into the championship, kind of thing. If not, there is a newer kind of name that they can. It's like, oh look, we have this kind of new talent. We're always making stars. Uh, and so I think this is one of those things. It's probably better if Silva wins. Uh, overall, but like I said, I think it's one of those like it's no matter what happens, this is a very kind of well booked fight
And I
for
think
the
we can,
UFC.
and I think we can also have those kind of title shot implication discussions regarding the two bantamweight fights. Because on the
Mm,
prelims we have Umar Nurmagomedov who's taking on Davison Figueiredo, as you mentioned,
yep.
and Sean O'Malley's going to be taking on Song Yadong. Now there was
Yes.
a lot of people who were surprised when Umar and Figgy wasn't put on the main card. Is this maybe the UFC trying to weigh the scales in favor of Sean O'Malley getting that fight with Piotr Jan? Because if you're looking, assuming that O'Malley and Umar both win their fights, which
Mm,
deep down, spoiler alert, I think they're both going to,
yeah.
the UFC are always going to favor the guy who has the bigger pedestal, the more sort of marquee sort of build around it.
Hmm.
High profile core main event, Sean O'Malley versus Umar on the prelims.
I think it's definitely, like I said, I was surprised that Figueiredo's on the undercard. But it does seem like the UFC wants to, and has been trying to get behind Sean O'Malley for the last, gosh, 3 or 4 years now at least. And kind of pushing him into the championship fights. He lost twice in a row. So I think this is kind of their like, yeah, but what if we did it again? And he's gotta, he's gotta go through this kind of thing. And it does seem like with Umar, I don't know if they want to avoid kind of the Dagestani kind of wrestlers uh that were so used to now in the UFC. So they're just kind of like, well, we'll put him over here, and if he wins, great. But hey, look at this guy with colorful hair.
Especially when you bear in mind what Laura Sanko said recently, where she basically implied that the UFC are going to be a lot more cutthroat when it comes to who they keep, who they release from the promotion.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are thinking, hey, if you do have this decision-heavy, wrestling-centric style, your days might well be numbered. And I don't think, look, I don't think the UFC are going to be cutting Umar anytime soon because the Nurmagomedov name still carries a lot of
Yeah,
weight.
boy, does it.
But it goes to show, I think the UFC are really aiming for that casual audience. And if you are wrestling heavy, they're not going to like it. And they're going to be a lot more open about not liking it.
And that really kind of, it doesn't surprise me, but it's baffling how much, especially recent, like it's always been like we want it to be a stand up, we want it to be, a war, very, brawl heavy. But if you're cutting guys who are good at the sport, what are we doing? You know what I mean? And it's and yeah, it's not super interesting to watch somebody get wrestled to the ground and held there for 15 minutes. But shouldn't that be an impetus for other fighters to be like, find a way to counter that? Like find a way to get out of their control and bring it to your game plan. Outside of like, instead of firing these people, just like, he's boring, let's get rid of him.
I,
Especially when they're undefeated, as we saw earlier last year. Uh
I've said for one of my bold predictions for 2026 was I think we're going to be seeing a lot more egregious stand-ups. I think the UFC and the
mhm.
athletic commissions are going to be going to the referees and saying, hey, don't give them 2 minutes, 3 minutes to work. If they're not doing
Yeah.
anything after 30, 40 seconds, stand them up. I think it's going to get to that stage. Whether
Oh
people
boy.
like it or not, that's an argument for another time. Personally, I
Mhm.
don't agree with it, but I'm not the one who's paying the billions.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, and but that's mixed martial arts. You know what I mean? Like going down to the ground and wrestling, and or even clinching up against the cage. It's shockingly boring, but it's part of the sport. And if that's not a thing that you want to watch, there's always kickboxing. There's always Muay Thai and that kind of thing.
And
Uh,
any other lower profile fights that you think we should keep an eye on?
yes. Let me bring it back here. I was looking at Michael Johnson versus Alexander Hernandez. Uh, you know, Michael Johnson has been here for a while, since The Ultimate Fighter, I think.
Yeah, it was in I think
GSP
tough.
versus Koscheck.
Yeah, I think tough 11. I think.
Oh wow. So I've also noticed with this card, there's a lot of fighters who are in their older 30s, 35, 36, 37, against a lot of these newer guys, newer-ish, and it does seem like the UFC is setting the stage, I guess, for this Paramount era. They're like, if you can get past, this kind of stalwart, this journeyman kind of fighter, there's kind of bigger things for you. I noticed that here with, like I said, with Hernandez and Johnson. I also noticed it with even Silva and Namajunas, Arnold Allen and Gene Silva. A lot of those are Nurmagomedov and Figueiredo.
Well, two names that stand out for me the first is Artiba Gauthier, who is really gathering a lot of momentum as this big knockout artist. A lot
Mhm.
of people calling him the middleweight Ngannou. He is just
Dang.
touching people and they're going down. I expect him to do the same against Andrei Polyaev.
Mhm.
So I'm seeing Gauthier as quite a strong favorite for that one. But You always think with these big knockout artists, how they're going to handle a little bit of adversity. What happens when the guy he's facing doesn't go down immediately? So I think that's maybe something to keep an eye out for. And from my own personal perspective, I've got to give a shout out to my boy Charles Johnson. He is on the prelims taking on Alex Perez.
Oh
And a
yeah.
Charles Johnson as well, who his stock is quite high without even fighting because he holds a win over Josh Van, the current flyweight champion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, son of a gun. He's one of those guys, he's 18-7. Uh he's one of the names in the flyweight division that I think can kind of rise up the ranks and be one of those guys. We all know how kind of poorly the UFC looks upon the flyweight division. Um, and I think with his kind of energy and his capability, he can be one of those guys who we can look for as kind of a stalwart in the division. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he fares on in this fight.
There is, however, one fight that we haven't been able to talk about, and it's coming up. We're going to sort of maybe take a bit of time, about 10, 15 minutes to discuss in a bit more detail, which is this card originally was supposed to have a title fight co-main. Kayla Harrison was set to defend the belt against Amanda Nunes, but we
Hmm.
received word in midweek that Kayla has had to pull out of the fight due to a herniated disc in her back. Now, the
Ooh.
UFC have used the terminology that the fight is postponed, which, in my opinion, tells me that they are looking to rebook it at some point. Um, what was your reaction when you first heard the news, Mitch?
It was. I mean, an injury is always disappointing for a couple of reasons. You hate to see somebody go down, especially this close to the fight, and especially for a championship kind of fight getting lost. Uh, and then Amanda Nunes coming back and fighting again. Uh, it's gonna be news no matter what happens. Uh, and so like I said, it was a shame to see. Uh, but I also kind of think that like they're gonna bring it back because they want Amanda Nunes at the forefront, at the center. She headlined UFC 200. She's basically the biggest name in female MMA since Ronda Rousey, since Cyborg. So we're gonna see it again, or we're gonna see it uh probably as soon as she's able to. And it does kind of feel like the UFC are feeding her to Nunes. Just like they are so actually in a very similar way, they thought they were feeding Nunes to Rousey when she came back after her loss. They were like, oh, Ronda's gonna come in and destroy her, and then she just got enveloped. Um, it kind of feels a very similar way, only this time we're trying to feed somebody to Nunes. So it could. I don't see it going a similar way, but I that's kind of what I feel is going on.
I think from the UFC's perspective, like I completely understand their decision making to postpone the fight to hopefully try and book it for a later date. I've got the
Mm,
feeling if Kayla is at a level of health that she's able to compete on the White House card, that's when they'll do
yeah,
that fight. Because they will want to try and give that the biggest bells and whistles they possibly can.
yeah.
My one concern, though, I actually have a couple of concerns. And again, you can put as much weight into my opinion. People know how I feel about Nunes.
I was
Never
gonna
been
say
the
you're
biggest
not the
fan of her.
biggest Nunes fan,
No,
yeah?
I've never been the biggest fan of her. Like, but I am going to try and be as impartial as I can regarding this, but because this
Sure.
is a concern relating to the wider weight class, which is obviously if the UFC are looking to try and book this fight, say 5 months, 6 months from now when Kayla's fully healthy,
Mhm.
that's 5 months, 6 months where you're basically having to stall the weight class.
Yeah.
And if
Um,
like if you're someone like Norma Dumont, for example, who's got like a six fight, 7 fight winning streak,
it's something
who
crazy
has
like
done
that.
enough to earn the title fight, you're going to have to wait. And she's, what, 36, 37 years old now.
Hmm.
And as big, look, Kayla versus Nunes is the biggest women's bantamweight fight you can make. And
Yeah.
nothing does come close. And I even say that as somebody who's not the biggest Nunes fan. It just feels like a really big sacrifice for a fight which, bearing in mind Kayla's health issues, bearing in mind how much she puts herself through to make 135, there's a chance this fight doesn't even happen.
That is true. Do you think they should have like vacated the title or go interim?
Vacant is, I think they would have gone interim. And
Yeah.
obviously we're gonna be talking about an interim title fight coming up later on in the show and its
Hmm.
justification. I think this is one occasion where an interim title is warranted because we have a champion who is injured and there are legitimate question marks over whether or not they're going to return.
Sure.
Maybe there should be an interim, but based on what I've heard from journalists, based on what I've seen online, there seems to be no appetite from the UFC to do that.
No, because I don't think it's about the division. I think it's about Amanda Nunes.
I
Uh,
agree.
so which is you would think they would just throw in an interim title just to get her on the card. Uh, but maybe it was too soon. Nobody wants to jump in with that little time to fight somebody like her. Um,
I have heard Norma has expressed interest online. Eileen Perez has put her name forward as well.
they are stronger people than I am. Uh, but yeah, it's not really. And that's kind of the odd thing because like I said earlier, the UFC is trying to make the UFC the brand. Like you go to see the UFC. But also they're trying to like keep up, Amanda Nunes, that's the name you want that. They're still trying to tout Connor, they're still trying to tout these names, but also the brand itself. It's a weird kind of like it's like they're split on what they want to push.
Yeah.
Um so I think the WWE had a very similar split where they wanted the name to be that's the reason you go to see the show and that's it. You don't go to see, John Cena or whatever. Um and I think the UFC tried that, but I don't know if in a legitimate sport that's possible. Because you don't go to see a boxing card just to go see boxing. You
Yeah.
know, you go to see Jake Paul get his jaw broken,
I mean,
or
how many times when it comes to boxing will you have a big marquee main event and
Mhm.
absolute nobodies on the undercard?
Exactly. I remember seeing, I can't remember what it was, but for these big fights, every fight in the undercard, up including to the semi main, the stands are basically empty. People kind of slowly are still slowly trickling in as the main card goes on. And they're just kind of there for the main event, which is obviously something the UFC wants to avoid. Uh, but yeah, they tried this push to make the brand the reason. Uh, but they didn't really go kind of all in for it. And so now they're trying to find those names to bring people back, and that's why Nunez is here. That's why I think they're pushing Sean O'Malley so hard, and as we'll get into later, Paddy Pimblett, to be these names the reason why you show up.
Do you think
Uh,
Nunes is worthy of the push? Because one of the sort of criticisms I've always made is the UFC did make a massive effort to try and get her over. And I do
yeah.
understand why. She did put in the legwork to justify the hype, the bravado. But
Mhm.
they gave her the pay-per-view main events and like they pulled less numbers than UFC 1.
That's baffling, by the way. I uh I don't know. And again we get into skill versus the name. Amanda Nunes is the best in the world when it comes to women's MMA, or at least was at one point, depending on how she does now. Uh, and so is that worth the main event if she doesn't bring in, bring in the people, bring in the money? Uh, which is kind of why this whole fight making thing is so difficult. Like,
Like
how do
I've always said the best way to use Nunes
Mhm.
would be kind of the same way they use Chef. If you have a main
Oh
event
yeah.
where there's maybe some question marks about how big it's going to be,
Mhm.
you add an extra title fight into the undercard and just kind of beef up the show. Like I
Yeah.
think that the big irony is that this would have been the card which would have been perfect for that because there are question marks about Paddy versus Gaethje as a title
Yeah.
fight.
Yeah, and I think that's why they wanted something to anchor the card. And Nunes is gonna she's a name, she's well known, we know what she's capable of. She's not a mystery. So and the way that I think Patty and Gaethje are well, not so much Gaethje, but Paddy Pimblett, this being his first main event, this being his first title shot, yeah. Um it's an it's odd. It's an odd it's an odd fight we find ourselves in. So to have an anchor like that, which I guess maybe now that Nunes isn't here, maybe it's Derrick Lewis, like that kind of name people know and fight style people like. That is kind of doing this thing. But I think you're right in that Nunes at this point might just be used as a solidifier of like, this person, you like what she does. She's relatively in the main event ish. She's going for a belt. She's going in the championship conversation. So if you don't like what we have in the main event, at least you got that.
So, one title fight isn't taking place at UFC 324, but one is, and it is our interim title fight, and it's one that raised a lot of eyebrows when it was announced. Justin Gaethje is back in action, hoping to make one final run to the belt, and he's going to be taking on the British hero to a lot of people, maybe not so much myself, but that's an argument for another time. Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. Now, the bookmakers for this one have Paddy as a minus 230 favourite. Gaethje comes in at plus 190. So, Mitch, we need to talk about that big elephant in the room before we go into the X's and O's of the fight itself,
Hmm.
which is Ilia Topuria was bookmarked to defend his belt in January. He has some personal issues, which we won't get into, was
Yeah.
forced out of the fight, and an interim belt was created. But Arman Sarukian, the number one contender, and a guy who Dana White guaranteed would be fighting for the belt after beating Dan Hooker, is not part of it.
Hmm. It's it's a choice. Um, this whole fight has seemed like, and now like I've said this before. I love Justin Gaethje. He's currently my favorite fighter going right now. So anytime I get to see him, A, in the main event, and B, for a championship, that's all well and good. Um, but it really feels like it feels thrown together, which is odd for such a big card.
Because I think as well, looking at the rankings as well, Gaethje is 4, I believe, and Paddy's
Mhm.
5, and Paddy's 5 off beating Michael Chandler, who's like 4,000 years old.
I was gonna say that's I was looking at Patty's record, because to me, for some reason, he still seems like the newer guy. He's been only been fighting in the UFC since 2021, but he's undefeated in the UFC since then. Uh, but outside of an ancient Michael Chandler and a Tony Ferguson who is so beyond washed, uh, I don't know that he's ever fought somebody at this level. You know what I mean? And a championship fight against Justin Gaethje is deep water.
So, what do you think's the biggest reason why you think they've gone with Paddy and Gaethje? Do you think it is the upside of one of those two as champion? Is it a grudge against Arman? Dana White seems to imply that he doesn't really
Yeah.
like him on a personal level? Or is this simply, as we sort of touched on with Umar earlier on, is this UFC scared about a wrestler fighting for the belt and potentially winning?
Well, I think it's mostly because he looks like the guy from the In-Betweeners. Uh, uh,
Jay,
yeah. No, I think it's because he's an affable guy. You know, he was likable for at least a little bit. I know people don't really jive on him too much anymore. But he's a personality, and then Justin Gaethje is a very dynamic stand-up fighter. And so I think it is the entertainment in sports entertainment that's they were going for. I don't know. Obviously Dana's got his grudges. And so I think it'd be silly to not think that's at least part of it. But I think they wanted to throw in kind of the most entertaining fight they could have, or what seems to be the most entertaining fight.
and the most
Uh
casual, friendly fight for Paramount.
exactly. You know, you don't want a very technical fight up front. Like that's the whole reason. One of the whole reasons that the UFC survived is because of Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar at the Ultimate Fighter season 1, and that was just a drag out throwdown fight for 15 minutes. Like if they were very technical and if they were very wrestling focused or BJJ focused, it probably wouldn't have worked. Um, so I think they want that kind of idea again. Obviously, probably not to the extent that it was before, but they want to throw in something like that. That's like, so when you bring your friends over and they're just like, why are they on the ground so much? You're just like, just wait until the end.
Friends that watch MMA, I'm still looking for those.
I don't think they exist.
Someone also pointed out as well, just to add to the whole sort of debacle regarding this interim title.
Mhm.
After Saturday, we're going to have three lightweight champions because you've got Ilya, you've got the interim champion,
Mhm.
and you've got Max, who's BMF champion. And bearing in
Oh
mind,
God.
what did Dana White say about boxing all those years ago? He said part of the reason boxing's in the mess it is
It's too many
because you
belts.
have about 4 or 5 different champions.
Yeah. Does the BMF championship really count? Like,
Well, the
is
headlining a pay-per-view with it.
oh, for God's sakes. I okay. um, it's such an odd concept. Like, it literally is just we need to throw a belt on some guys. And who is it now? It's Holloway?
It's Holloway, yeah.
Because he beat Gaethje at 300.
He beat Gaethje at 300, and then he beat Dustin at the
Oh,
New
then he did
Orleans
it again.
card.
Right. Um, so I guess if they're treating it like a belt, then it's a belt. God damn. I don't know. In my mind, it was always more of a trope. Like, here, The Rock gave this to you. Um, so yeah, it's odd, and the UFC loves its interim belts. For the last couple of years anyway. Um, and yeah, it just feels like we're just giving belts for the sake of belts, and that always devalues A, the championship itself, and B, the division as a whole. Because if it look what happened with John Jones, and how many times we had to defend an interim belt, uh, for God, 400 something days, 500 something days, uh, and like the heavyweight division's a joke. So if we keep this up, and I understand interim belts are necessary. You know, Taporia can't fight for personal reasons. It's not really on him. Um, but we can also main event a card without a belt. You know what I
That's
mean? Like, there's nothing wrong with it.
I think the last time we did have a non-title UFC pay-per-view main event, I think it was Diaz and Tony Ferguson.
Oh wow,
Yeah, and we all know the farce
yeah,
regarding that one as well.
yeah, it's
Um,
true.
and the worst part is though, is all this talk has been about the interim belt itself. I actually think in terms of matchmaking, this fight does make sense. Like, yeah, I mean, there
It
is
does.
like you can rightfully make a lot of criticisms regarding Paddy's matchmaking, and they
Mhm.
have slow rolled him and been quite strategic in who they've given him. If you
Yeah,
are going to go down this path of going for like the aging sort of action fighters, I would say Gaethje is a logical step.
he's probably next. Yeah,
Yeah.
I yeah with Paddy. I again like I always see him as like for whatever reason like oh he just got here. Um, but he's been around a while. Like I said, he's undefeated in the UFC. He's 23-3. Um, and like I said, he beat Michael Chandler and he beat Tony Ferguson. That's not nothing. I mean, yeah, it was very late stage Tony Ferguson, but still. Um,
Honestly, I'd make the argument that his most impressive win, and again, this is one of my hot takes. I think Paddy looked best in the UFC against
mhm.
Jordan Levitt. Not because Jordan Levitt's like a world-class elite fighter or anything like that,
Yeah,
but he is very good on the ground. And
true.
I think Paddy submitting it, Jordan Levitt, was something that made me think there is something of an upside to him. Maybe not to the level of what he is right now, which is number 5 in the world fighting for an interim belt, but
Yeah.
when it comes to grappling, he is very good in my opinion.
He had, and just looking at the methods he's won, he TKO'd Chandler, a submission for King Green, a decision against Jared Gordon and Tony Ferguson, but submission, knockout, submission, TKO. He's not grinding it out. He's not getting away by the skin of his teeth, except for what was it, his fight?
He should have lost against Gordon.
Yeah, Drew Gordon is what who. And then, but I think that's what soured a lot of people on him because he needed to really come out with a win there, and he didn't, and then he still kind of like bragged about it. Um, so this is, like I said, this is his biggest test. I mean, ever. Um, and it's also to the point where like, if he loses, I don't think it destroys his career. Like I said, it's been a slow kind of rollout. If we look at somebody like Darren Till, who was going to be like the UFC's golden boy, or even before that, Sage Northcutt. If anybody remembers Sage Northcutt.
I'm actually planning a video on Sage later on this year.
Oh, see, that's interesting. Um, but these guys who they were going to be like they're the next thing, they get pushed a little too far, a little too fast, they lose, and then there's nothing there because they just kind of started. Um, so I wonder if Paddy loses, if he'll slip a little bit, but I don't think it completely counts him out unless it's the start of a trend.
So we both watched the Michael Chandler fight. We both did like a rundown of some of Paddy's old fights to prep
Mhm.
for this show. Obviously, we both watched the Michael Chandler fight. It's been uploaded
Yes.
onto YouTube over the past couple of days as well. How much of that victory, in your opinion, if you had like a pie chart,
Mhm.
how much of it was Paddy winning because he made improvements to his game, and how much of it was Chandler being washed?
So Paddy absolutely made improvements in his game. Like Chandler is 38, 39 at the time. Um which is up there. I say that as a spry man of 35. Uh it's but it's not so far beyond where you're like, why is he still fighting? Um so has Chandler lost a step? Yeah, probably. Hard not to at this in this sport at that age. But to put it all on that, I think it'd be silly. Uh, and I think with Paddy, you could definitely see a more kind of consistent game plan coming into the fight with Chandler. I see it a little bit like with Francis Ngannou when he fought, was it Cyril Gane?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and he just got destroyed that first round or that first fight, and then he came back.
Oh no,
Uh,
it was Stipe. Stipe.
Stipe, excuse me. Uh, and he came back and he was more patient and he was more, ready for everything that kind of happened, and he destroyed the man. Uh, I kind of see that as the same trend that Patty's on.
I think
Uh,
the big thing that stood out for me in terms of Paddy in that fight, I think his distance management was very good,
yes.
using the teep kicks to keep Chandler on guard, attacking him with the low kicks as well. But also as well, I don't know if it was like the UFC pressure to be the sort of exciting brawler,
Hmm.
but if you compare Paddy in those early UFC fights, he's sort of like barreling forward and he's getting countered and he's getting
Yeah.
tagged on that chin and his defense has always been suspect.
Hmm.
And that's always dangerous when it comes against Gaethje. But I think he was a lot more patient when he fought Chandler. He was a lot more aware
Yeah.
of the issues regarding not so much his chin. I think he can take punches, but there's only so many big shots that you're willing to endure.
Hmm.
So I think that was something that did improve was he was aware of that. And I didn't feel like he put himself into as much danger as what he had done in previous fights.
Yeah. He did seem to be more careful and more cautious and uh more knowledgeable about the violence coming his way. Because even if you have a chin of absolute granite, eventually it gets worn away.
Unless you're Marvin
Um,
Vittori.
well, yeah, but he's superhuman. Uh, so and I think he has to know coming into a fight with Justin Gaethje, like that's the thing he has to worry about. Uh, so I imagine we're gonna get a bit of a maybe a slower game plan from Paddy Pimblett and kind of more cautious, which is not what the UFC wants to hear. But uh it's a championship fight. It could only come around once for him. So it's something that I think he's going to be super aware of and kind of use that in his game plan, or hopefully, or he's going to throw caution to the wind and get his ass kicked, but who knows.
I think the big thing as well he needs to work on as well is if you followed Paddy's career going back to Cage Warriors, he's
Mhm.
always had an issue of handling pressure. I mean, if you watch that fight against
Yeah.
Soren Bach, like Paddy has a lot of success very early on. He comes close to submitting Bach.
Mm.
But once he doesn't get the job done and Bach realizes that's pretty much what he's given me. He's the one
Yeah.
pushing forward, and Paddy just has no answer. Now, admittedly, he has improved during that time. He's bulked up a lot
Mhm.
because I think he was fighting the featherweight in Cage Warriors, and now he's obviously beefed up. He's the lightweight now.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a concern, though. Bearing in mind what's one of Justin Gaethje's biggest strengths: pressure.
Yeah. But that fight against Soren Bach is the last time he's lost.
Hmm.
So obviously he learned, and obviously he's kind of taken that to heart. Um, but you're right. If he there, not only is there pressure fighting Justin Gaethje, um, but it's a championship fight. It's 5 rounds.
Mm.
It's the main event. It's the lights get hot. And anybody will tell you it doesn't matter how many times you've done this. Sometimes that gets to you. Um,
It certainly does. Like I always remember, I actually brought this up when we did the preview of one of my, from a personal perspective, because I'm
mhm.
biased, but Raquel Pennington, Myra Silver, and I
Oh
even
yeah.
said that one of the big factors is that Silver is going from fighting in the apex, pretty low profile, and now she's
Yeah.
fighting in front of a crowd in a title fight, compared to Raquel, who knows how to handle the lights. So I think that
I
maybe
could
can be a factor.
I could not imagine that kind of switch. Going from an empty Apex to an arena like that. Good Lord.
Yeah, and I actually think Myra, I think outside of the debut, I think Myra fought her entire career before that fight in the Apex.
Mhm. Wow. that
So
sucks.
we're going to talk about Justin Gaethje in a bit more detail here. A 26-5 record. So his most recent win came against Rafael Fiziev.
Mhm.
And that came in March 2025, so a little month earlier before Paddy's most recent fight. Notable wins include the two wins over Fiziev, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson. So they both have a comparable opponent. And you've also got Cowboy Cerrone, Edson Barboza, and Michael Johnson in his debut. Some of his notable losses: Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira. If Gage is losing, he's only losing to the very best.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it's important to look at the people who he beat, but it's also important to look at the people who they lose against. And if you're gonna lose against anybody, Poirier, Khabib, Charlie Olives, and Max Holloway,
Max Holloway as well, I forgot to mention
n-
that. Only
not
like the
bad.
biggest card of all time, and I forgot that one.
With one of the craziest knockouts of all time. If you're fighting Max Holloway and he points to the ground, don't do shit.
Dustin had the right idea. People give Dustin a lot of grief because he didn't
Yeah,
stand and bang.
of course not. Are you nuts? Um, but yeah, so he's not losing against random schmucks, and he's 30, 37, 37 now,
37, I believe, yeah.
which is well, it's beyond the age of decline, as people are saying. Um, but he doesn't look it. Like he still fights kind of the way he's always fought. Um, he's less, hands down face presented, but he's still in that kind of zone that he's always been in. And so when it comes to his fight here against Paddy, I the thing I keep coming back to is Justin has fought somebody like Paddy. I don't know if Paddy's fought somebody like Justin. And that could just be, because obviously Gaethje's been at this a lot longer. He's been in championship, although I think only interim championship fights.
He fought Charles for the full belt, and he fought Khabib for the full belt as well.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
But I
Uh,
do believe Gaethje would become the first two-time interim champion. There have been interim champions that have defended their belt,
yeah.
but nobody has won the belt, lost it, and then won another belt later on.
Wow. All right. What a stupid stat to have. Uh,
I'm the master of those stupid stats.
oh no, that's amazing. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what I feel. Um, and it's you said on the betting odds, Patty is
Bucky's favorite,
the
yeah.
favorite. Yeah. And this is one of those things where, like, because I'm a fan, I don't know if I'm holding like my bias towards it. I don't know if I see it the same way. Um,
I think Paddy should be the favorite. I'm always a little bit wary of fighters when he passed 35. I don't think
yeah.
there's a curse, but I do think it is a sort of drop-off point.
Well, yeah.
And I think a lot of people are putting weight as well into Gage's limitations against
Mhm.
grapplers.
Well,
But then
Gaethje
again,
started as a grappler, didn't he? He started as a
yeah,
wrestler.
I
Uh,
think he was an All-American.
yeah. That's obviously he's pivoted. Um, but that's not something you lose. So I wonder if he can kind of regain that sort of vibe if it happens to go that way.
I think it is a little bit overstated as well because the two people who did submit him were Khabib and Charles. And
Yeah.
the Charles one he couldn't really do anything about because he was knocked doolally because he got dropped.
Mhm. And Khabib is Khabib.
Yeah.
Uh,
um, I also have this sneaky suspicion as well in that I've looked at the way Paddy's been match made. I don't think they would have booked this fight if they didn't think Paddy had a really good shot at winning. And I think maybe that's played into the bookmakers' odds as well.
I think you're right. Like I said, this is Paddy's biggest test, but it's not so out of the realm of possible that it's the lambs to the slaughter. Um, so I think should Paddy win this, um, I think it's deserved, and I think it makes sense that he was put in this position and he wasn't kind of pushed too quickly. He wasn't kind of thrown in there. Um, I have a hard time seeing it though. For whatever reason, there's something kind of like holding me back from it.
There's a little air of Woodley versus Till about this, in that
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of moment of truth is coming in the actual title fight.
Mhm.
And as we saw with Darren Till, he just was not ready for that kind of fight. I think he only
No,
landed like one strike during the entire match.
that poor bastard. Oh my God. Every time I think about that, I'm just like, I really kind of threw you around. Um,
One thing I'm really looking forward to is the clinch battle,
mhm.
because one of the big strengths I think Justin Gaethje has always had throughout his career is
Right.
his ability to wear people down in the clinch.
Mhm.
Because he always seems to have this habit of sort of like leaning forward, and while he's engaging, then come the low kicks, and then
Yeah.
come the body shots, and he does that a lot. Maybe not so much in the UFC, but especially in the World Series of Fighting. That was his
Mhm.
way to sort of grind people down.
Yeah.
Is Gaethje going to risk doing that though, when Paddy has a history of tying you up and going for flying triangles? That's something I'm intrigued to see.
Mhm. Well,
He tried it
yeah,
against Chandler.
yeah. If you watch the retro reviews, you know how much I love clinches against the cage. So I think that the other thing we got to worry about is kind of Paddy's gas tank. I don't think he's ever fought 5 rounds. Um,
Not in the UFC. He's gone 5 rounds in Cage Warriors
in
before
Cage
though.
Wars. Um, so I think we don't know how well he does in the later rounds. 25 minutes is a long time, especially fighting somebody like Justin. And so I think in the early rounds we might see that kind of wear down uh to take us into the later rounds where Justin can just pick him apart. Um, but yeah, I do wonder if he will be more cognizant of his submission ability. Uh, as we know, Paddy is liable to to start just pulling out random stuff in these kinds of scenarios. So I have to imagine it is something Justin's gonna do to really, because that's his game plan, to suck the energy out of him. Um, but it's something to watch.
We know
Uh,
that Paddy has limitations when it comes to his striking defense,
mhm.
but the chin so far has held up.
Yeah.
I think he fought, I think his name was Vendramini in his UFC debut, and Vendramini did rock him, but Paddy was
Mhm.
able to recover and come back. Justin Cracks has a lot of power. Do you think he has the power to crack that Scouse chin?
I
Scousers don't get knocked out, apparently.
that's I think I don't know. I don't. That's the thing. I can see a TKO. I don't know if he'll you know, knock him flat. Um,
Sort of like out on his feet, wobbling, and then Herb Dean steps in.
yeah, kind of one of the, or just like not intelligently defending, that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know if it'll be a straight kind of complete knockout, but I can see him getting so deep into the fight, so deep into the water that he can't get himself out.
So, money where your mouth is. Which way are you going with this one?
Oh, crap. Uh, gosh. I see. I wanna say Justin Gaethje because that's my boy. but there's something about Paddy Pimblett that's just I would feel silly if I didn't go for that one. Because I feel like there's some kind of
You feel it's kind of been scripted in a way.
well, not scripted in a way, but more like I wouldn't be surprised. Like, as much as we've been talking about it, and as much as we've been kind of questioning his capability and that kind of thing, I think that if it's going to happen, if Paddy Pimblett is going to be a main eventer, if he's going to be a champion, if he's going to be like the top of the card, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen now, or it's not gonna happen. And so I think I might go with Paddy.
Everything about this fight on paper, I should favor Justin Gaethje because I
Right?
have so many concerns about that striking defense against a guy who hits as hard as Gaethje can.
Mhm.
But it's the younger fighter. It's the wrestler. It's a guy who has shown limitations when it comes to his submission defense. And bearing that in mind, I am going to lean towards Paddy.
Yeah.
I'm going to say like a third round sub. But if Gaethje goes in there and just completely exposes Paddy, I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's there's something about it, eh? Like you watch this fight and you're like, well, yeah, obviously Justin. But then there's something that's catching in the back of your mind that you're just
Hmm.
like, or uh but yeah, I don't see it going 5 rounds, I tell you that. Um but I like I said, I think it's gonna be probably either a TKO for Justin or submission for Patty. And it's one of the more kind of up in the air fights. Which I mean, we've been talking about how people are kind of second guessing this fight at all, being the main event. But here we are, just going. Actually, it's pretty interesting. maybe,
As a
maybe.
fight, it makes sense. It's just whether or not it's a title fight.
Yeah. Well, it's there. What, four and five, and then yeah, you're right. Shouldn't be a title fight, but here we are.
And with that, we have come to the end of the UFC 324 preview show. My name has been Karl Bainbridge, and that has been Mitchell McIntyre, who's been stepping in on short notice. A bit of a Bisping against Rockhold when it comes to late replacements delivering.
It has, and I hope it ends up better than it did for Michael Bisping. I still need the eyes.
Hey, he won a world title with one eye.
That's true, which is more than I've ever done, I will say.
So, Mitchell, if people have been endeared by your appearance on here, where's the best place to get in touch with yourself and some of your work with the INC family and elsewhere?
Excellent. I am pretty much everywhere on social media. I am at Empty Square, EMPTYSQUARE. I am on Blue Sky way more than I'm on Twitter. But that's for another video. Outside of that, if you are a fan of my dulcet tones and you want to hear a podcast, I am the Brightwall podcast over on Spotify and YouTube if you're into slightly creepy things with a comedic bent. But if you are here for the MMA and only the MMA, I am here at It's Not Cage Fighting Live. I do your retro reviews. And if you're feeling it, you can go to patreon.com/, It's Not Cage Fighting. Become a $10 backer or above, and I will do one just for you. You get to pick your very own retro review. You don't have to vote for it or nothing. And I will do that sitting just over there, actually. Um,
And since Canada and the US have both had tariffs placed on them, then we could do with the money.
that's true. God help us. It has been a time. Uh,
It's a good thing you did bring up the retro reviews though, because obviously we've got two numbered cards which are back to back, which means we've got two retro reviews which are coming up back to back. So, Mitchell, you are the man who's talked through these cards. What are we going to be covering this Thursday and the Thursday after?
Yes, it is going to be a very busy couple of weeks here for us. Coming up next, we have two major cards. We have UFC 52, which is one very close to my heart. That is Chuck Liddell versus Randy Couture. which is one of the first cards, or at least pay-per-view cards, I remember being like cognitively aware of. It was the first one after the Ultimate Fighter 1 finale, so I think it's probably the first one a lot of people were really kind of paying attention to. So it is a very important milestone in mixed martial arts in the UFC, and it means a lot going into this one. And then after that, we will be going to another big one. You guys voted for this one en masse. It is UFC 194, Aldo versus McGregor. This one, we know this one. I ain't got to tell you nothing. One of the biggest fights in the flyweight division, or featherweight division. Excuse me. One of the biggest fights in the featherweight division, probably ever. The vibe going into this main event is insane. But there's also 4 other fights we got to talk about, which are less insane. You'll find out when we get there. But those are our 2 major ones coming out in the next couple of weeks. Outside,
I was personally hoping that 218 won that one.
Yeah, there's our for those of you who don't know, we do put up polls. So you get to pick, if you don't have the money for the Patreon, you get to kind of pick which one's coming up. So it's important to keep abreast of the post notifications over on the mothership. So yeah, the one, it was 218. Which ones did it beat? It beat 218. It beat
231, which is Max Holloway, Brian Ortega, and also WEC 41, which is a criminally underrated fight, Mike Brown and Uriah Faber 2.
Oh, yeah. See, WEC would be fun to go back to, because that's another one that I'm aware of, but I haven't actually kind of watched a fight from it, unless you count going through it in the UFC video games.
So we do have the polls available on the main channel. It's Not Cagefighting, including one for an upcoming retro review, which is still available. You still can have the opportunity to try and sway the vote. Now, for anybody who does follow the main channel, we know that we like to dedicate March to Women's MMA Month. The 2 videos that we release are both based around the fairer side of the sport, and that stretches over to our retro reviews as well. So, Mitch, who are we covering for March's retro review? And what are our nominees?
So over at our March review, we are looking at the one and only Joanna Jędrzejczyk, with a difficult name to spell and to say out loud. But one of the most well-known and kind of important fighters, I think, in WMMA that are going right now. Let me go over to our main site here and tell you which ones you are voting through.
The joys of live broadcasting.
Yes. I apologize. I should have done this earlier. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, it's easy enough done. Trust me, you were brought in on short notice. I'll give you a bit of a break.
Yes. So our big 3 right now are Fight Night Joanna versus Panay. We have the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale and Fight Night Joanna versus Watterson. Those are the 3 big ones going on right now. There's still time to vote, but right now the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale is running away with it. So if you want to stop that, now is the time.
Yes, certainly so. And we are looking forward to covering that one come March time. I'm certainly looking forward to it as well, because I can have a little bit of a break instead of having to work overtime to try and get these 2 retro reviews together. Speaking of putting things together, I am going to be, moment this show ends, I'm going to be splicing together not the retro review. I'm going to be splicing together the preview show. That's going to be live. You're watching it right now. And with that being said, as we delve into the night here in Northeast England, I want to say my goodbye. So a big thank you to everyone who has been tuning in. Again, this took part in completely short notice, but we were able to put it together. Hopefully you weren't put off by me rambling on non-stop about nothing. With that being said, my name has been Karl Bainbridge. That's been Mitchell McIntyre. Hopefully, Joe will be back next week and we'll talk about our second numbered event in 2 weeks. UFC 325 is taking place down under, and to one of the most dubious title fights for many years, Alex Volkanovski, Diego Lopez 2. This is the INC. Thank you for watching.